So,
Okay, so let's just turn our attention to the credentialed librarian and how they would push not only reading skill but also the love of reading. So
hmm
it's not just that you know how to read, you like it.
hmm
And so let's go over what they can do to really push from their side this whole idea that yes, we can read and we enjoy it, and it's a lifetime relationship between books and information and the whole idea of being really literate in our society. So let's start with unlimited access. How can, from your point of view, how can the librarian just open the floodgates? It's not just one book a week or two books a week.
hmm
What what should they do to really push uh, access?
So we have to go back and look at how librarians and school media specialists were 20, 30 years ago. A lot of them were activists. A lot of them would push to have bookmobiles that showed up in the neighborhood, just like the ice cream that would trail the ice cream truck, right? And
Yeah.
so they would deliver books right to the doorsteps of children. You could return your books. And so when we take out important services like that, now librarians and media specialists now have to come up with these policies because they're afraid that the children are going to lose the books and then they won't have access to them. And so, first, I think it takes a lot of deprogramming of people who think that way. We need to make sure that we fill the shelves up so that there are enough books. So if some books get lost, they get lost. I think that that's just the price we pay for doing business as literacy people. We know that we're going to lose some books, and we need to be okay with that. We need to make sure that we're circulating enough books daily so that children can have access. I do have a concern about some of the policies that do happen at individual schools where you have this, they can only check out one book a week, which, I mean, if you're trying to usher children into literacy and open up the floodgates, they need to have access to print books every single day. They need to have access to digital books every single day. They need to have access to digital materials every single day. They need to have access to, different things, not just books, but board games. They need to have access as they start to get a little older, documentaries, because kids love documentaries and things like that as they start to get a little older. And so if we're still stuck on the mindset of, well, we just need to make sure that children check out one book per week. I mean, is that even learning? What are they learning with that? I'm not even sure what that's about and where that
That's
came.
right.
I think sometimes people, particularly in literacy, just all literacy professionals, kind of get caught up in these wives' tales about literacy and learning, and then it just keeps going. It's as
Yeah.
bad as the one book a week is as bad as the if you just read 15 minutes a day, you'll be an avid reader, and we know that that's not true.
Right.
It's just a wives' tale. It's crazy. So
So it's kind of how many books can you check out? How many can you carry?
exactly, exactly.
How
I
many?
like to I like to think of
If
it
you've got
as
them on your phone, you've got them everywhere. You've got them digitally. You've got them
yes.
audio. You've got,
I like to think of it as the children with the wagons back in the 80s. Every child in the 80s had a wagon. I don't care where you lived. And we would take that wagon to the library and we'd fill it up with as many books as we want. And
right.
then we'll walk back home with that wagon. And that's how
That's
I like
right.
to think about giving children access to wide reading and literacy. Let them fill up those wagons with whatever they want to read. Yeah.
So, that connection to the public library is really important.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
student has to have a public library card
Yes.
and be able to get there. And if they can't get there, the public library you can check out 5,000 books or something from the public library and get them into rotating classroom collections.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because
hmm
I mean, you get 100, 200 books in the classroom and it never changes.
Hmm.
that's going to be interesting for the first 3 weeks, and then it's just sitters.
Oh
So
yeah.
what do you think about rotating? How do we get that happening?
I definitely think that that's important. When I taught in Florida, I actually worked with two librarians, and they would give me books. I would tell them what topic I was working on, and these were the city librarians. And they would say, "Okay, just show up." And I say, "Are you serious?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I would show up, and they had three big boxes for me every week.
Yeah,
And so all I had to do was show up, get the books, bring them to my classroom, make sure that I got all the books back from the children. After we used them for a week, I would take the books back and I would come back and they had 300 more.
yeah,
So that year that I taught, I mean, those children got access to thousands of books, not hundreds,
exactly.
thousands within one academic year.
That's
And I
right.
really wish that I think about that now. I wish that some of my colleagues had trailed me where I went and took the books back and then they checked out the books that I took back, right? So then they would be able to have that amount of books in their classroom every week.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you don't have that wide reading like that, children are losing those wide reading experiences because they'll never know what that's like. They'll
Yeah,
never know
so
what it's like
let's
to
yeah,
experience.
let's talk about when their topics are being studied in the classroom. What about wide reading?
Mhm,
About whether you're doing neighborhood helpers or animals or whatever the topic
mhm.
is. How can we push wide reading, a ton of reading into what they're studying that's interesting?
So first, I think that the first thing that teachers need to do is they need to start inundating their classrooms with more nonfiction books. I have a concern about the overuse of fiction books in the classroom, particularly in the early grades. I think that that's a mistake. I think waiting until children get in third grade because of the wives' tales that go, we have another wives' tale in literacy where people say, well, children are learning to read K through 2, and then they're reading to learn K, 3 and up. And that is not true either. Children are always reading to learn. They're always reading to comprehend. And so those wives' tales that are just floating around, these myths, okay, they become fact for people, and then they start structuring policy that way. And so teachers sometimes have an overabundance of fiction books in the classroom beginning in pre-K. It's books about animals, it's books about, you know, so it's books about fantasy, it's all these books, and those books are great, don't get me wrong, but it takes away from the fact that they should be having biographies in there. They should be having nonfiction informational texts in there. They should be having newspapers in there, magazines in there, documentaries in there. And so when they don't have those things starting in the early grades, it does really impact the children's education because they're not building the necessary background knowledge that they're going to need when they get to first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade and up. And we see that every year. Hmm.
So yeah, that's really because in today's classrooms you might have a number of languages spoken. You've
Hmm.
got English learners, you've got, so it's going to take not just a reading textbook or reading one book together. That
Hmm.
doesn't work. You've got to have huge variety to try to lift every child, huh?
Yeah.
So, well, let's say if an administrator was really interested in really flooding, kids with reading and through a credentialed librarian who really knows how.
Hmm.
What's your recommendation to that principal and superintendent, school boards, whatever?
So my recommendation, and it's so funny that you asked this because I got asked the same thing when I did an interview, when I did a podcast with the librarians in Philadelphia, right before it was 2 years into COVID, and they were having some of the same issues where people wanted to shut down libraries and things like that. And I warned all those administrators back then. I told them, you are essentially saying, okay, I'm choosing between a reading specialist and a librarian, which is essentially saying, I'm going to sell you a house and I'm going to have you choose between a bathroom and a kitchen. You need both. You can't have one or the other, right? So if you end up not having a librarian, we need to talk about what ends up missing. So what ends up missing is one, the knowledge base that librarians have. So you have all these children who will have no access to the level of knowledge. Librarians are information specialists. So if you want children to learn, you don't fire the information specialists. The second thing that you're going to end up missing is children are not going to have a way, a consistent plan in place to get access to as many books as they need, as many materials that they need. The teachers won't have access either. So why reading is going to be out the window, because we already know what the teachers are doing. Oftentimes librarians have to do trainings for teachers to tell them to stop having, I apologize, a relative. Librarians have to do trainings for teachers to ensure that they're reading widely, that they're getting exposure to books, because it's not something that teachers always spend time doing. Teachers have to really structure their time to be able to read new books and things like that. So we depend on librarians to give us that information. The third thing is parents will not have the information that they normally have, because parents can now go to a school librarian, they can go to a city librarian. So the minute you take that out, now you're removing librarians from the literacy process. And who controls the literacy process in the summer for children? Librarians, because we have summer reading programs. During the regular academic year, librarians put out a reading calendar that children and schools and communities follow from month to month. So if you start talking about eliminating a librarian instead of supporting them and getting them assistance to work with the volume of people that are coming in and out of libraries, you're going to end up having a community that's going to look up in 3 years and say, how come we have all these illiterate people walking around here? What's going on here? And there's just this assumption that you can just replace a librarian with a computer or a bookstore. And that is just not true. We have to look at what librarians do. They cannot be replaced. Most great librarians, if you know anything about librarians, and we both do, they're information specialists, and they are leveraging all these technologies right now. They can leverage these technologies better than anybody, better than some of the tech folks that are doing it, right? So, especially the ones coming out of the digital humanities. So we have to make sure that we're not removing people who play a critical role in the literacy process for children out of the picture. Because if you do it, I mean, we have no framework for what that's going to look like 5 years from now, when we have all these children who don't have access to books, who don't have access to a library, who don't have access to wide reading, who don't know how to research anything. I mean, we have no framework for how bad that's going to be. And I think that's the problem, is that we've always functioned on the idea that we would have these things in place and then we would get more funding to do more things. Now
Right.
we're dealing with people saying, well, we're just going to cut what we already have. And that is not that is not an ideal situation. That is not something that is going to benefit anyone. There are no shortcuts to literacy, and we need to start having that conversation more, and having more conversations about how we are going to fully fund literacy for children, families, teachers, and communities, so that we can create literate citizens in the 21st century.
That sounds like your bottom line.
It really is. So,
So, well, it's been a pleasure to work with you and say, it's not just librarians trying to toot their own horn. It's a
mhm,
much bigger issue, and
it
we
is.
we all need to join hands and make this work. And every single kid who is a wide reader of not
Mhm.
only fiction but nonfiction and enjoys it, they've got a life skill, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, well, thank you for being with me today, and I'm sure that many people will watch and appreciate